perspective, but that's the kind of thing I'd like to see. Thanks to all the teachers who suggested that you be here, and thanks to all of you for taking the suggestion. Unfortunately, I'm supposed to do introductions, and unfortunately, I'm not very good at introductions. So I think one of the great things that we get to see now is to actually see people that lived through periods of history and are here to tell about it. And we're delighted to have a case of that, where somebody who went through one of the interesting moments in American history is here and willing and able to talk about it. So would you join me in welcoming Masaji Inoshita?
I'm a kind of a wanderer, so I will not use the speaker, excepting through this particular system that we have. And appreciate the fact that you've taken time out to visit it, to hear somebody talk about something that happened many, many, many years ago. It's kind of depressing at times for me to think about 60-some years ago, but I've gotten over it, and I can joke about a few things, a few details that happened back then. But the recent stories in the newspaper about Rosa Parks and her story that has come out in recent days because she passed away reminds me of the fact that the American persons of Japanese ancestry and immigrant Japanese went through a trial period, a period in which the civil rights was kind of in the background, and yet at the same time it was our desire to bring it up, to be accepted as one of the majority race, and to a certain extent, I think we have succeeded. But to go back, I grew up as a second-class citizen. My parents came from Japan. First, my father came in 1900, and my mother came as a picture bride in 1916. And when she hit the dockside and see all these men looking for their wives, they had married the picture, and she saw the most handsome guy on the dock was my father. But at the same time, she looked at him more carefully, and then she came to a conclusion that the man she married was older than her own father. But at the same time, they got along real well. There was 10 children produced, and 2 died on their way somewhere, and there's 8 of us still living, okay, of which I'm the oldest. That puts me as something like I'll be 86 in about 3 weeks. By growing up a second-class citizen, I bowed to the majority. I played baseball, third base, and was fairly good at it. And because I was such an aggressive player, people used to be scared of third base. I think I used some of my Japanese judo skills and pitched a couple of guys. And so that's the way I grew up. But at the same time, I had to be awful careful. I remember going to high school and my mother telling me, look, Mosh, be careful. Be careful because a white girl will come and talk to you, okay? You're such a stick out that they'll come and talk to you. Be sure you grab another person to join the conversation. I mean, you can understand this, I think, today, even today, this might be a sort of a thing that sticks out, But that's the way I grew up. Graduated high school, went to 1 year of junior college. Anybody hear of Hancock Junior College? Probably not. But the point is, I left school because my father had a stroke, and I now became an instant farmer, okay? My father had a few acres of land, but it was 1939 when I left the school. In 1939, the war had already started in Europe, and everything we produced was very valuable, and we doing very, very well, but my father had a stroke, so I left and became a farmer. And one of my brothers also did the same thing. We were very well known in the sense that everybody wanted our produce. And they came and they bought right off the farm, and we shipped a truckload a day to Los Angeles. And so we're operating in very, very good condition. But when war was declared, or when war started with Japan attacking Pearl Harbor, instantly I knew that we had a problem, a big, big problem. And I knew that we would be affected, that a person of Japanese ancestry, including my father, my mother, and us younger American-borns were going to be affected. And within 5 days, the FBI is knocking on our door. Where is Masaji Inoshita? And I pointed him out at the breakfast table. They motioned for him to come forward. And when he got up there, they put the handcuffs on him. They didn't tell us where he was going to be taken. They didn't tell us why he was being arrested. They just said, come with me. They didn't tell him to pack a suitcase or nothing. And many, many months later, I was to hear for the first time that he had been taken to Tuna Canyon in Southern California, which is a place you probably never heard of. And later on, he was shipped up to Missoula, Montana, and from there he was sent to Fort Lincoln, Nebraska. And that's where he stayed. We didn't know that for many, many months. Meanwhile, I'm back at home. I am convinced, I am proud to say, that I'm telling everybody I am an American citizen with the rights that were given to me by birth in the United States. That I was determined to continue farming. That I was determined to stand up for the United States. Strange as that may sound, when your father and your mother are being attacked, it's a condition that's very, very difficult to stand. But I took this stand, and we continued to farm. And strangely enough, the Filipino workers that were working for my father and I continued to stay working for us, even though on most branches the Filipinos left because of the problem in the Philippine Islands and the war going on. And we continued to plant. But on February 19th of 1942, President Roosevelt was persuaded to sign an executive order 9066. This executive order was not approved by Congress or anybody. He just went in and was persuaded to sign this executive order, which was prepared for him by an assistant in the War Department, John J. McCloy by name, and President Roosevelt signed this. And he gave, by this executive order, he gave the right to military commanders in each military area. In each military area, the right to examine, to investigate, and to remove any and all persons who might be of detriment to American property, American aircraft, airfields, blow up highways, roads, bridges, and that kind of stuff. The mayor of San Francisco, Rossi by name, was alarmed when he saw this executive order. He says, look, and he looked at that, and he was worried that the large Italian population in his city was going to be affected, and he contacted the Attorney General of the United States, Biddle by name, and asked him, look, I have a large Italian immigrant and immigrant citizens in my city. Will they be affected? And the answer came right back, only persons of Japanese ancestry will be affected. Okay? And so by this executive order, the naval commander in the Hawaiian Islands went through and he arrested language instructors, martial arts instructors, people who did business with Japan, and I think there's another category which I forget. Anyway, he rounded up about 1,100, 1,200 people and sent them to Love Island, kept them there for the time being, and when the relocation camps were built in the United States, he sent those 1,100 to the United States. In the Western Defense Command, which General DeWitt was commander, he split Washington right smack in half, Oregon in half, came down Highway 99, and he had originally intended to draw a line about 200 miles off of the California coast down into Mexico, and to be part of the military zone number 1 and military zone number 2. But the clamor came up from this state of Arizona, the farmers wanting to get all the Japanese out of this valley, demanded that General DeWitt draw a line that came in up at Kingman, came down Wickenburg, through Grand Avenue, Apache Boulevard, and the main street in Mesa, and drew this line. And everyone lived south of that line, were in military zone number 1. And those who were on the north side of that street, Grand Avenue, were people in zone number 2. They could stay. And he began to issue what is known as exclusion orders. And these exclusion orders were very similar in nature. There was about 125 or 30 of these exclusion orders. And in each exclusion order, which was issued 3 or 4 days apart, he would define a certain area, okay, a certain area. And usually I carry around a sample, but there's so many of you that wouldn't do much good. And these areas would define by street, all right? Area number so-and-so of the county so-and-so, and they drew maps and distributed them all around. All persons of Japanese ancestry. All persons of Japanese ancestry, and that included any amount of Japanese blood. There were cases of people who were 1/16 Japanese, and they were sent to camp because all persons were affected, man, woman, and child. Okay? And in this exclusion order, it defined what they could take to the campsite, what they could not take to the campsite. And generally speaking, what you needed to take to the camp was what you could carry in your 2 hands. Okay? What you could carry in your 2 hands is what you could take to camp. Generally speaking, no bedding, but medicine, possibly cutlery, kitchen utensils, but not much of anything else could be taken. Now, what can you carry with your 2 hands? Anyway, that was the story. I know my mother took one of the major items in camp, a sewing machine. And one of the kids had to carry this electric sewing machine, which was a very popular item in camp. Now, because there was no separation, just one old barracks with 4 divisions in there and families, men and women, all living together. They had to buy curtains through the mail order to separate the rooms and spaces and so forth. Now, that was okay. We went to camp with what we could carry. But you know, what we left behind is the big story of my life. I was farming close to 200 acres of vegetable crops, of which I had planted every single inch as late as possible. I planted 200 acres, and now came evacuation time. I couldn't even sell the lease. The lease was written in such a manner that I couldn't transfer the lease to any other person. So eventually I wound up walking away from those particular crops that I had planted. But on the other hand, the farm had 16 horses, 2 trucks, a pickup, and a lot of other farming equipment that attached to tractors and horses. Can you imagine that these people now knew what was going to happen. We had to get rid of everything. We're going to camp with what we could carry. Can you imagine people calling you and saying, well, what do you want for the horses, boss? And I'd say, well, my dad paid $800 for a team. Would you pay $400? They laughed out loud. Look, man, get real. You gotta leave town in 3 days. Get real. So I would say, well, what would we pay? Can you imagine getting offers of $25 for a team of horses? Imagine getting an offer for $50 for a team of horses that you paid $800 for. But that's what happened. And I sold them, and I was glad that they were now in hands. Somebody was going to look after them. I gave away chickens, I gave away rabbits, I gave away anything that wasn't, I couldn't pack away. And just about that very moment, a gentleman came who was a friend of my father's, a Caucasian man. And I tell the story that he must weigh 500 pounds, 6'5" or so, had a double chin on his double chin. And he spread out his arm like that. The loose muscles on his arms would hang down to his belt line. And the squeaky voice, he says, "Moms, what are you doing?" I can't do the squeaky voice. Anyway, what are you doing? I said, look, I have only 3 more days to get rid of my livestock, the horses and all this stuff. He says, "Marks, why didn't you come talk to me?" I said, "Mister, I couldn't do that. If I did that, I came to you and I said, look, allow me to use the barn to store my stuff. You would find the whole community against you. You would be called a Jap lover." That was the nature of the community at that particular time, moment and space and time. I couldn't do that to you, I said. He says, "Never mind what people will say." And we had a long argument. Finally, I gave up, and we stored everything that was unsold in his barn. Okay, great big, a mail pouch barn. Anyway, I'm happy. I've got rid of everything. I'm ready to depart the next day to be picked up by the Army with all that I could carry. Went downtown to get a haircut. And the barber I was going to was not Japanese. He happened to be Polish, a first-generation Polish whose father had come as immigrants to this country. And as soon as he saw me, he says, "Moss, where you been?" I says, "Well, I've been busy trying to get rid of everything, and I thought I need to get a haircut before I go to camp." He says, "Why didn't you come?" He says, "We abandoned a farm in Wichita, Kansas in the Dust Bowl days, and I offer it to you. You go there and live there as long as you need to or want to. Farm the land if you need to or want to. All you have to do is hook up the electricity. You have to go out and pump the water, or you have to use an outdoor toilet, but go there." I said, "Sorry, the Army has us locked in. I got to go to camp tomorrow morning. I cannot accept your offer." But that offer stuck to my mind and sticks with me today, till the day I die, of a man's generosity, willing to help a person in dire need. Okay? We were picked up by the Army the next day. We were deposited in front of a church, on the sidewalk, with all of our possessions, which I could carry, waiting for the Army to pick us up. And all of a sudden, I began across the street, in an empty lot. There was a gathering bunch of people. These people were there, and I looked more closely. They were people we did business with. They were people who we had associated with in times past. They were people that you went to school with. They were all concerned what was happening to us, happening to their friend. But nobody dared to say a word. Nobody said, "Sorry, Moss, to see you go." Nobody said, "Hope you come back, Moss." No, people were afraid to open up their voice. afraid to say anything because they didn't want to be stigmatized by Jack Lover. But this down the street comes a gentleman I mentioned to you before, this 500-pound hunk of man, who I probably add 50 pounds every time I tell the story. But the point is, he came down the street and the car was leaning over to one side, and I knew it was him. And he walks towards the family. And the soldier at Port Arms is saying, "Sir, you cannot go there." And he sticks out that big old arm with that sagging muscle and pushes the soldier and the gun aside. "I'm going to go talk to my friends." He come over and he hugged my mother. Mumbled something or another. And he hugged me. And he said, "Look, Moss, this war is going to be over. And when it is, you come back here. You're here, Moss," he repeated, "you come back here, because I'm going to look after you." All right? That was the last thing I remember so well about leaving Santa Maria Valley. I'm herded onto a train in Guadalupe. The windows are nailed shut. All the blinds are down. I don't know where we're going. And the soldier is pushing us onto the train. The Tulare was real close by. In just a matter of 2-3 hours, I'm in the city of Tulare. And I get out. And I'm looking towards the Tulare Fairgrounds. And the train track is only about a half a block away. And I'm walking towards the train tracks. And the gates to this Tulare Assembly Center opens up about 20 feet wide. Opened up. And there were people on both sides who were seeing who were the next victims. All right? And I look past them and I see on the far side a tower. In this particular case, no more than 15 or 20 feet high. And on the other side, there was 2 more. And on the right side, there was 2 more. 5 towers in all outside of the fence. And each one had a soldier with a rifle pointing down at me. And I nearly laughed under such grim conditions for the simple reason the Army had told us, "We are sending you to camp for your protection." Okay? This is the kind of situation that I encountered. And of course, being a young person with some responsibility, I'm put in charge of a mess hall. There was 10 in this camp. We fed 330 people in this mess hall. Man, I'll tell you, the food was great. If you like liver, heart, tongue, things like this. And breakfast was a big favorite. Since I'm the leader, they give me the menu. The truck would give me the menu and I'd punch it right on. I wouldn't even look at it, except after the first day. The menu would tell you 2 slices of bread, 2 pieces of bacon, okay, and 2 eggs. Now, I know a lot of you eat more than that, but I think it will sustain most of us, I'm sure it will sustain you. And I just thought, well, that's great. But I'm the receiver, I guess. I watch what comes off of the truck, what's for my mess hall. To feed 330 people, they left me 10 loaves of bread. How many slices of a loaf of bread? Anybody know? Something simple as that. 20 slices, 22 slices maybe? Okay? 25 slices if it's a pound and a half bread? Okay? They left me a half a case of eggs. Anybody come off the farm can tell me how many dozens in a case of eggs? Anybody work in the store? 30 dozens. Yeah, 30 dozens. They left me a half a case of eggs to feed 330 people. And the menu says 2 eggs to everybody. Okay? How about bacon? Anybody know what a side of bacon weighs? Anybody? Come off a farm? Tell me what a side of bacon is? about 10 pounds, 11 pounds at the most. I got to give 2 pieces of bacon to 330 people. Guess how big those 2 pieces were? They were like a postage stamp, okay? That's the way it was. So only the kids would line up at that door in the morning. Maybe 150 kids would line up at that door. And we'd feed them with a spoon. Give them a half a slice of bread. 2 pieces of bacon the size of a postage stamp. They wouldn't even sit down. They just pushed that stuff into their mouth, threw the plate aside, rushed out the door, went to another mess hall trying to get another bite to eat. Anybody that was 10, 12 years old or older never came for breakfast. Of course, lunch and dinner were a little bit better. Okay? It was enough to make me lose 15 pounds in 3 months or so. Eventually, of course, if I spent so much time on food, it would take the rest of the day. Finally, they decided they're going to move us. Now they had completed these 10 assembly centers, or they thought they had completed 10 assembly centers located Western United States, 2 in California at Manzanar and Tule Lake, 2 in the state of Arkansas, Lower and Benson, 1 each in Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, and Idaho, and 2 camps in the state of Arizona. On reservations, 2 are here in Arizona. 1 was near Parker, called Poston. You've heard of this big metropolis of Poston. and there was a camp there south of here, about 35 miles or so, on the Secretone Indian Reservation. All right? In each camp, maybe some of them were smaller and they only had 8,500 or so. And some of them was one of the camps that we had in Secretone had only about 5,000. The larger ones will hold about 8,500. But in Poston, there were 17,385 persons in the 3 camps over there. There were 13,000 odd figure here on this reservation. Okay? Buildings were not complete. They had to jump across sewer lines. They had to jump across water lines. And each person, each family was given 1/4 of a barrack. The barracks were 20 feet wide, about 80 feet long, army style. Okay? And each family got 1/4 of a barrack. 20 by 20, in some cases 20 by 25 when they had little larger barracks. Okay? And larger families got 2. We got 2 because we were such a small family of about 10 people. And individuals in certain places had real narrow spaces, just wide enough to line up individual bunks, a bunk for the immigrant Japanese who had no family. It was a real nice looking place. And Gila River is a place that you could have complimented. Had a double roof, red in color, and the white sidewalls or oyster shell colored sidewalls were real nice. And I thought, hey, this place is better than the place we used to live in back in Santa Maria. That lasted about 3 hours. And then, in this country, and especially on the reservation, there's a breeze that kicks up every afternoon. About 2 o'clock, this breeze kicks up. And when it did, it picked up all that dust that the Army had churned over with their machinery, and the whole place was one big dust storm. And it would last for about 2 hours. You could hardly see. I mean, you're blinded. More than a half a barrack away, you couldn't see where you were going. Be that as it may, it didn't take very long for the community of Casa Grande to find out we were there. Their cotton pickers had left the country. They went to these war jobs located in California or elsewhere. Nobody wanted to pick the cotton, so they came to the campsite please pick our cotton. We will pay you 3 cents a pound. And I'm a dummy. I was in the kitchen cooking rice, but I was working for $16 a month. Okay? And so when they said 3 cents a pound to pick cotton, I figured, well, I'm going out to the cotton field and pick cotton. Probably do. I'm a tough, battle-trained farmer. I know what hard work is, but I never picked cotton before in my life. Anybody here pick cotton? Man, that is hard, tough work. And being as tough as I am, I'm the top picker of the day, and I earn $3.50 my first day's work. And then I kept that up because I was better than $16 a month. And I'm waiting for a camouflage factory to open up in a concentration camp. They're going to put in a camouflage factory for the army to use. I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Meanwhile, on the outside, what is happening? The United States Army had already solved the code that the Japanese used. So they were happy. Until it came time to actual battle, they were using their own language instead of the battle code, which was already solved. And this language of the Japanese is a tough one to handle. There was a few missionary kids that could do it, but very few other people knew how to handle the Japanese. And the Japanese confidently just used this language. The army is baffled. Where were these people who could read, write, and speak Japanese? We're all behind barbed wire. Okay? So now, they had a problem. Because in the start of the war, they had changed the status of the American-born Japanese who might have been drafted, who might have been serving in the army. They changed their status to 4C. And I don't know people who drafted ever heard of 4C, but it says undesirable for military service. The Army had this tremendous need for language people. Their own code is saying they couldn't be drafted. So they thought, well, they'll volunteer out of the camp. They'll be glad to get out of camp. They'll volunteer by the thousands. Wrong. Yeah? They went to Poston, the largest camp of all. Please volunteer. We need your services to translate, interrogate, and interpret. Out of 17,000 some odd, and after some severe haggling, they got 9 volunteers. And they came to Gila River. And they started this haggling all over again. Please join the military intelligence service. But the population inside the camp is saying, no, we don't want our youngsters to go fight Japan. If they're going to go to Europe or go elsewhere, that's okay, but not to fight Japan. I knew this. And so I didn't talk to my mother and nor my brothers or my sisters. And I was one of the 29 dummies that volunteered out of Gila River. 300 of us out of the camps who went to a school in Savage, Minnesota. Spent 6 months studying the language. And then I went to Shelby, Mississippi to take my basic training. Basic training with the 442nd Infantry Regiment and the 100th Battalion that came out of Hawaii. And afterwards, I was drafted to go to Burma, and I served 12 months with the British in Burma. Okay? And most of that 12 months was in the front line. Can you imagine being a soldier? Imagine being someone responsible and doing interrogation work. But the British soldier, the Gurkhas, the Sikhs, were all trained to kill people like my shape, my body style. Okay? So I'm guarded day and night, 24 hours. I couldn't go to the bathroom without taking 2 Gurkha soldiers with me. That's my life for 12 months. It's not, they treated me well. Thereafter, and the British apologized a whole lot. At first they didn't want us, but when the necessity came, they took us. And the secret exists to this day that these Americans of Japanese ancestry who served with them are still a secret, in the sense that they were ashamed of the fact that they didn't recruit their own people in Canada who were Japanese. And finally it happened that the Canadian Army didn't want their language-speaking people, so they were Canadian citizens that did not serve the Canadian Army, they served the British Army. And eventually we were supplanted by people from Canada. And I was sent to China. I sailed down the Yangtze. I sailed down the Yangtze under a Japanese flag. Can you believe this? I took 2 surrenders. I was part of 2 surrenders on the Yangtze River. Okay? And the reason for that is this. The Japanese were fighting communist Chinese on the Yangtze. And the Japanese were fighting nationalist Chinese on the Yangtze. The communists and the nationalist Chinese were fighting each other. And I'm in the middle there trying to bring peace. Okay? And I also got through my duties, went to Nanking, went to Shanghai, went to Okinawa for 2-3 weeks, and occupied Japan. Occupied Japan. Okay? But meanwhile, what is happening at home? What is happening at home? My father come out of North Dakota, came to join the family because I was now a hostage for the United States Army. Okay? But you know what happened is that the military, Japanese who had joined the military, changed the opinion of America. Up until this war started, most Americans had this negative image of the Japanese because that was what was planted in their minds. But these Japanese soldiers, especially out of Shelby, Mississippi, with the 442, went overseas and established a record that's a record today. There is no other unit this size that has captured the imagination of the American Army. Can you imagine a unit that never was over 5,000 in strength? Never more than, a few men, over 5,000. But a total of 15,000 persons of Japanese ancestry went through the 442. And what is their record? 7 presidential citations. Presidential citations meaning that they were the lead group into a battle. In the United States history from World War I, World War II, and the Korean conflicts, the Congress of the United States has granted approximately 500 Congressional Medals of Honor. Here is a unit. Can you imagine a unit that has 22 Congressional Medals of Honor? Okay? This began to capture the opinion of the majority of the United States. And they began to see that we were not yellow bastards from Japan trying to overcome the United States. They began to see these people as individual soldiers who were working very, very hard for the United States. Let me give you one example, maybe 2 examples. 1 or 2 examples anyway. What happened is, 10 minutes? 5 minutes?
Take 10, but...
Oh my goodness gracious, I could go for another hour. But the point is, I'll give you one example. The 34th and the 35th Divisions out of Texas, commanded by General Dahlquist, was in a eastern France area, the main city being Bruyères. But the Germans had dug in on that surrounding territory, and they were not going to let them go, let anybody pass into Germany through them. And so General Dahlquist wires the headquarters of the Supreme Headquarters, and he says, look, I'm stymied here in Bruyères. Send more troops. And the answer from the Supreme Headquarters was, every darn unit is committed, with the exception of one regiment who is in Nice, France for R&R. Send them, says Dahlquist. And so the 442 marches into battle in Bruyères area. And inside of 10 days, they knocked the Germans out of Bruyères, Bifontaine, Belmont. There's another B in there somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, it escapes me for the moment. Anyway, they knocked them all out, and they went through a tremendous casualty. Dahlquist now has conquered this particular area. Meanwhile, right alongside a battalion of the 35th Division was fighting Germans right close by. And they were having some success. All of a sudden, the Germans pick up everything and start retreating. 15 kilometers, or approximately 9 miles or so, retreated back into the Black Forest. Wow. And the American A Battalion of the 35th Division, we're going to get them, we're going to get them, and they start chasing them. Chased them. And all of a sudden, they found themselves surrounded by Germans, being cut to pieces. Cut to pieces. Because they couldn't see each other hardly. General Dahlquist saw that his battalion is now surrounded by Germans. On 2 occasions, he sent his men in there, go rescue them, okay? And each time, he threw up his hands. He said, this is too expensive, too much casualties. And he pulled his men out. And he wired Supreme Headquarters. I've tried on 2 occasions to rescue my A battalion, but I've given up. They're lost. They are a lost battalion. In other words, they were given up for lost as lost. And the Supreme Headquarters said, look, the media now has the story of this lost battalion. They're your men. You go get them. So instead of sending his own troops, he picks on the 442 that had just finished fighting for him to recover 4 Bs, 4 cities, 4 towns, 4 villages. Anyway, he picks on the 442 to go rescue this battalion. In 5 days of hand-to-hand combat, never seen since the Civil War, the 442 rescues 211 men of this A Battalion Texas unit. Great rejoicing. General Dahlquist was real happy. He turns to Colonel Winters, commander of the 442, and he said, look, your men have done my unit a tremendous service today. Okay, I want to honor them. I want them all mustered out tomorrow morning, and I will pay them honor. And next morning in the haze of dawn, there was less than 500 people out in front. A Battalion reporting a detention for 90 men out of 180. B Battalion reporting with 60 men out of 180. And so on down the line. G Company report with 30 men standing at attention. I Company is standing at attention with 5 men. About this time, General Dahlquist turns to Colonel Winter and he says, where are the rest of your men? Sir, General Dahlquist, sir, came the reply. That's all that are left. This became national news. This became the news of the from meeting, people are saying, those are our enemies we are fighting? Just after that, towards the end of the war, 527, all Japanese cannon unit, part of the 442 was separated off. Now that the Germans are on the run, and this cannon unit was chasing them clear across Germany. All of a sudden they came upon a strange location. Buildings. Yet in the snow they could seem like bodies are out there in the middle. And so they blew open the locks on the gate. Found out from the Germans that they had discovered and opened up the gates of Dachau. They gave them all the food that they could spare, but they left because they were on a run for another job. Later, other units, American units, tried to claim that they were the liberators of Dachau. But it is the Germans themselves that said, liberators of Dachau, what happened here? We were liberated by brown men who said that their parents, their brothers and sisters were locked up in prison in a concentration camp in the United States. Stories like this began to spread. The American public began to see that there's something wrong with the stories they've heard all this time. And they began to protest. People began to join them. Okay? Meanwhile, the people who are here in the United States established, tried took 4 cases to the Supreme Court. The Matsui case, the Hirabayashi case, Korematsu case, Mitsui Endo case, for 4 Supreme Court instituted by persons of Japanese ancestry. And the first go around in 1944, all 4 cases lost in the Supreme Court. Okay, in the following year, the four cases were resubmitted. Matsui case, Hirabayashi, Korematsu case lost 2 times. They could no longer appeal. Okay, they lost their case. And so even today, ladies and gentlemen, the United States Army has the right to arrest an ethnic group purely because they are an ethnic group. The United States Army has the right to limit the movements and actions of any ethnic group. Okay? These laws these were determined back in World War II concerning the Japanese. They can arrest you, put you away, and they could deny you your trial. But in 45, the United States is looking for a way out of this mess. They're finding that the public opinion is against them concerning persons of Japanese ancestry. They are looking for a way to close the story. And so what do? They choose the 4th case, the Mitsui Endo case, which all she wanted was, you've arrested me, I'm behind barbed wire, bring the charges against me, I want to be tried by my peers. If I'm guilty, I will remain at your control. If I am not guilty, I want to be able to return to my home. I want to be able to return to my job. And the United States Army did not press any charges against her. So consequently, 110,000 people, 120,000 people could now go and leave these relocation centers, these concentration camps, go back to where they came from. Because in 3.5 years of history, being examined by the FBI, being examined by the Office of Naval Investigation, being investigated by other units of the United States, not one person of Japanese ancestry was convicted of espionage or any anti-U.S. activity. Not one person. That, ladies and gentlemen, brings it to a close. And the United States Army is now determined to close these camps. Okay? Ask you to voluntarily leave and go back to where you came from. And then were they received with open arms? The story is no. The story is no. And at the very final end, there was about 4,000 persons that refused to leave the camp, refused freedom. They petitioned the War Relocation Authority, let us stay here. Let us be wards of the government like the Indian people until we die. Okay? No, says the government. No, you have to leave by a certain date. And when that date came, what did the Army do? They bought you a ticket to where they had originally picked you up. Gave you a bus ticket and $25 to restart your life. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story that's hard to tell. I have to do it in a manner that's rough on you people. But I want you to understand that the American public is now became behind us, helped us along. I remember the Supreme Court cases, and the second time it went before the Supreme Court. There were organization after organization wanted to be amicus curiae to the problem. At the end, there was 30, 40 different organizations supporting the Supreme Court cases. And although there's 3 lost, there was 1 left that has been of merit to us. Now I've made you aware of why we can arrest Arabs because they're Arabs. We can impose laws because they are Arabs. Now I made you aware, I hope that you will continue to understand that sometimes we need to stand up to be spoken, stand up to speak and say, hey, you gotta be like Rosa Parks. Make a determination, a stand. I thank you for your time. If you have questions, I will answer them.